question from Alice. You mentioned a relationship between brain and consciousness. What is the current understanding of the relationship between consciousness and heart, and consciousness and gut? The psychedelic movement scene seems to me still to be rather male-dominated. Is that fair? Although it's starting to change. And I have wondered what kinds of effects that is having on the direction of research and the interpretation of these kinds of experiences. So relationship between consciousness and heart, and consciousness and gut. Does that inspire anything, Rupert?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, there's a lot of work on microbiomes now, and evidence that what happens in your microbiome can affect your body. But I think more relevant to this question, even than that, is the fact that traditional systems of understanding the relation of consciousness to the body have not focused primarily on the brain. I mean, the chakra system in Hinduism and in Buddhism has different psychic centers, the third eye, the throat, the heart, the gut. There's different chakras which are all part of our conscious, the way the mind is related to the body. And it's not all through the head. I mean, modern neuroscience has this enormous brain-centered view. It's a cerebrocentric view of consciousness. And I think these traditional cultures that have seen the heart and other areas as being centers of different kinds of conscious experience. And it's true in the West as well. I mean, the medieval understanding and the ancient understanding in the West was that the heart was the main center of thought and imagination. In the Magnificat, which is part of the liturgy of evensong in the Church of England, it says, "He hath scattered the proud in the imagination of their hearts." So, that's just every day that's being said in our churches and cathedrals. It's taken for granted that the heart is the center of imagination, not just love, not like sort of a heart sign meaning love. It's a center of the deeper being and consciousness. And we've lost sight of that by having this obsessive idea that brains and consciousness must be totally linked. In all these science fantasy films about disembodied brains being able to think, and it's become, and then the brain's a computer, and it's, I think, an extreme distortion of the way our bodies and our consciousness is related. So I think the microbiome is one reminder of that, but just paying some attention to these traditional ways of understanding it is another.
Yeah. I tend to agree with a lot of those sentiments, but I do think there is a shift now, at least among some neuroscientists, to be looking at biorhythms and how they interrelate. We'll be recording heart rate and breathing, and just knowing that when you do that, seeing how much of the variance it explains of brain activity is really large, and now we're discovering things like rhythms of gut movements correlate with brain rhythms. So what I would like to promote among people who see value in kind of a heart-centered approach would be don't overshoot in thinking somehow that explains things, that does away with any value in understanding brain, for example. That would be a case of overshooting. And so I just ask for people to be, if they do have a kind of tendency to be a bit sort of anti-science and think that there can be sort of value in referring to heart, just think that these things aren't inconsistent. They're really not. Science is just a method. That's all it is. And so, maybe there's, in the same way that we can still appreciate things of nature, trees and such like, when we understand how they interrelate with their environments and such like, for me, it gives a deeper wonder about the nature of nature and the universe. And a similar thing can happen when we think about the role of heart and a heart-centered approach with psychedelic therapy.
Not so long ago, finished an amazing book called I Contain Multitudes, which is all about exploring the microbiome and highlights the fact that up to half of the cells in and on the human body are actually non-human, are bacterial or otherwise. And that's a study waiting to be done, how psychedelics affect the microbiome, perhaps. And yeah, which goes with the fact that that microbiome, particularly in the gut, can certainly affect mood and mental states from the presence of a quite significant amount of neurons in the gut.
90% of the body's serotonin is in the gut.
90% of the serotonin is in the gut. I didn't know that. Thank you.